I'm delighted to introduce Dave Bamford and Alan Sheldrick from Migra. Welcome to Housing Technology, guys.
Hi, George.
Yeah, hi, good to meet you.
So just to kick things off from our viewers' perspective, can you just tell us a little bit about Migra? How did it all start?
Welcome, everyone. So I'm the Managing Director of Migra Data. The initial idea to form the business sort of started around 2017, really. I was working on the implementation of Clarion for their housing transformation project, and of the whole sort of wide group of contractors that were working there. And through that delivery that went on for several years, we formed a sort of really tight-knit team with a whole bunch of experiences and capabilities that sort of complemented each other. Probably from then on in, over the years, we've continued to work together. So, we've been working on various other large housing associations, large transformations that have been around the UK. That idea just wouldn't go away, really. So in 2023, I decided to sort of take the big leap, really, into forming Migra Data. And for the past 2 years, we've continued to work in the sector. And where we've been, as I explained earlier, mainly a contractor-based model, we've now started to recruit some permanent full-time resources. We've now sort of got a steady platform of work that we're doing, projects that we're involved with, and it felt a really good time now to bring Dave in to really start to move the business forward to strengthen and develop Migra Data, the brand, not only in housing but also across other sectors.
Yeah, so I've joined in the last month, really, as commercial director, and my role is going to be to kind of help Migra expand. Firstly, across housing. So some of your viewers, readers might recognise me from a previous business that worked a lot in social housing in data management as well. But really, my specialism here is on the commercial side. So brand awareness and helping people understand what we do and how we do it and what makes us different. But then starting to look as we get bigger at growing the team and growing the remit as well, and seeing if we can expand into maybe adjacent sectors and around that. But our bread and butter is always going to be housing, because it's such a great sector to work in, and we know a lot of people in the sector who are really engaging and really collaborative, and that makes it just easier to work in than a lot of other sectors.
You could have gone in several directions, I guess, but what made you choose or focus data migration in our sector? What was the inspiration behind the decision?
So I think for me, it's been a privilege. So I've worked in a number of sectors over the years, some retail, telecoms and housing, and it's been a real privilege to be involved in social housing and the migrations. Until I started working at Clarion, I'd not been involved in the sector at all. And what I've worked with and what I've observed is that each of the housing associations I've worked with are full of teams of people who work really hard, are very passionate about housing, and it's been great to have been part of those transformation programs that have brought the benefit to the customers. So I think obviously myself, I've obviously felt very comfortable working with those people, and there's a real can-do attitude across the housing associations I've worked with. A substantial number of challenges, but there's people very passionate about what they do, and I've found that sort of fits very well with our sort of brand and the sentiment behind the work that we deliver.
I think for me, the great thing about the sector is that, as I say, the collaboration between people. There's a lot of sharing of ideas, there's a lot of sharing of information and best practice, and actually what I've seen over the last sort of 8 years odd I've been involved in housing now is a real journey of improvement from a technical point of view. When I started, it was all pretty old-fashioned systems and a lot of things still done on paper and big wads of documents shoved into various drives, and we've seen technology start to develop in the sector specifically for the sector. I know, George, you've been a big part of that and driving it and with Housing Technology Magazine, but getting from legacy systems onto the latest systems with the latest technology you've got to migrate at some point. And actually those skills, the skills that Alan and the guys have got are pretty transitory. You only need them when you're doing a migration, but when you're doing a migration, only those skills will do. So it's nice to be seen as experts within a sector for that, because it means if anybody's going through a migration, they know to reach out to, and we can support them on that. And actually we've worked with the systems that they're using, and we've come across the concepts that they're familiar with, and we've dealt with the thorny issues that they're struggling with, which obviously gives us an advantage and helps us just make things a little bit smoother.
Perfect, because that brings me on to the fact that, you know, now anyone who's been through a migration project knows that it can be tough and it can be messy, and it's a messy process. But I'm interested in what makes Migra's approach different. How do you make it less of a headache for your clients?
We've obviously got a methodology, which I think Dave will probably take us through shortly. But we've got a lot of demonstrable experience. We're experts in delivering reliable and repeatable data migration processes. It's the thing that we've been doing. All of the people in the team have that same drive to deliver high quality migrations. And indeed, we've been pulled in to some of the housing associations we've worked with where others have failed, and we've gone on to be successful. One of the areas that we have good experiences in around golden records, which are often required for housing sector migrations, and I think a lot of other businesses struggle with these, and this is a complex area now we have a significant amount of experience with. A golden record is ultimately a single accurate and complete version of data, where often multiple bits of conflicting data are held in the legacy systems. And our work at housing associations are most likely to involve those. So we've got a lot of credible experience, not only in the way that we approach that work, but in the way that our processes are repeatable. I think for Bamford we did 18 trial cutovers. So we can clearly demonstrate we can turn the handle, turn the migration processes, and we also put a lot of focus not only on the migration itself, but on data quality, but also on the constraints. And constraints for us are actually making sure that the data is fit for purpose. So we invest a significant amount of time in making sure that the data that we put into the target systems is of high quality and meets the target processes.
I think what Alan's touched on there is, and he probably won't blow his own trumpet for this, but what him and the guys have done is developed a step-by-step methodology through a data migration that is repeatable and is demonstrable to the client before you even start on it. So where we've been brought in a program recovery context where work has already started and maybe it hasn't gone to plan, we can kind of identify very quickly which aspects of the migration have been covered, which haven't, where there are gaps that need to be filled. We work a lot on roles and responsibilities, because ultimately in a migration there are a huge amount of moving parts. So different departments within a social housing provider, because you're touching asset, you're touching tenant, you're touching finance, HR, all of these systems. Then you've got the system integrator who are providing the new technology and the new platform and their resources. And then you need something to knit all of that together. And often data gets kind of, oh, we thought you were doing it. Oh, no, we thought you were doing it. And that's where ultimately programs tend to fall down. Now we can come in at any point in the journey and find out where you are, map that into our methodology, and know that we're going to be able to tell you what's left to get you to the successful outcome. So, we've actually spent a lot of time documenting those steps out and producing it. And it is kind of a traditional waterfall model, one thing follows another, but blending that with the ability to maybe adapt to priorities. So if we want to focus on a particular area, we want to get asset data into the new system first, we can do that. And then we can say, well, actually, if we do that, what that's going to mean is we need to make a little change to the existing finance system, or we need to adapt the repair system over here to take a new data feed or something of that nature. So it's all about being able to tell the client what's going to happen before it happens and prepare them for it, so they're coming on that journey with us. And it is, I think there's 200 odd steps in the methodology, Alan. There's it's not it's not the work of a week. You know, these projects can run for many months, but if you've got a clear plan, that helps you budget, that helps you plan for time, that helps you plan for cutover and stuff. You don't want to end up in a situation where you're trying to do a big system migration in December, for example, because everyone's about to go away for Christmas. So you know, it's about forward planning and about understanding what the steps on the journey and what the critical path looks like to success.
The important thing that our customers want to know is how long is this going to take, how many people do we need, and I think through the methodology that Dave's been talking about, it gives us the confidence that we can more accurately prescribe how long these migrations are going to take and what the cost is for the housing associations or the customers. So I think our experience has sort of brought us to this point where we have this clear way of working now to deliver successfully for clients. And I think arguably we've probably been involved in some of the largest and well-known housing transformation programs in recent years as well in the UK. So I think that also puts us in a really good place for people to have confidence in our methodology and approaches to delivering.
You've obviously had lots of hands-on experience with some of probably the sector's largest providers and systems, you know, Dynamics, I think you mentioned. And
there's loads, George. Dynamics, Northgate, Orchard, Keystone. Alan will tell you more than me, but yeah.
Lifespan, yes, and it's surprising actually that whilst there's a large plethora of systems out there, a lot of the sort of main housing providers that we work with, they do tend to stick with sort of Lifespan, Orchard, Keystone, those same ones keep coming around, Northgate. So that again puts us in a good place because we have a really good understanding of the data models now, and the typical issues and challenges, not only that housing associations have, but also we have. We're trying to understand how we migrate the data out and how we create those golden records, because as I've mentioned, many of these housing associations are born out of lots of smaller organisations, and when we come on board, typically all of those legacy systems are still in play, and obviously we're trying to move to one single target.
With the fact of those systems, I mean, can you share a little bit about the journey and how those systems shaped your thinking?
The first thing we do, we either request or we build an ERD, so a diagram, a schematic of the database itself, which supports our understanding thinking. It can textualize the database itself, and it brings it all to life. So we can actually then start to work with the front end users and start to explain and understand how we can start to unpick the system to commence the migration activity. So what we typically do is we typically have a data discovery phase, which we go through all of those pieces, which then helps us level the playing field, and then we can have a really honest conversation about what we found and the way forwards. Dave?
Yeah, and I think working with similar systems again and again, it just gives you firstly the knowledge of the system, but also a lot of the code in a migration is, a lot of it ends up being throwaway because the way people implement these systems differs. So one Dynamics implementation might not be identical to another. In fact, I remember working with a client back in my previous role, that were two associations that had merged. Both had open housing, and they were completely incompatible with each other, despite being the same version of the same software, but they'd just been bespoked by each of the respective associations so much that they'd lost their interoperability. And so trying to unpick that to get them onto a single version of it is where a lot of the skill and a lot of the art of a data migration comes in. So we're writing programs that are going to move, ultimately simply going to move the data from one place to another, but we have to be mindful of what the new system requires for it to function, what the business requires for it to function, and how we're going to translate between an old world and a new world, because inevitably codes change. Things like documents as well, where a document will have a reference number from a prior system. When it goes to the new system, unless you've ported that across as well, you're going to break that link, and so potentially have lots of documents that sit redundant because you don't actually know where they belong. But for our part as well, one of the nice things about being a provider is we're kind of obligated to stay on the crest of the wave in terms of what's coming down the track from suppliers. So we're looking at how machine learning, how large language models, how other AI tools are going to augment the systems that housing providers are using. How can they augment what we do You know, are there tools we can use to speed up the process or to de-risk the process, probably more importantly. And that's a big part of our growth strategy going forward. So, you know, we'll have dedicated people looking into sort of the R&D aspect of that to try and make these migrations not necessarily completely automated, because I don't think that would be the right solution, but trying to, just as I say, de-risk and de-stress some of the, because it is ultimately one of the riskiest things any business can do. Because if it goes wrong, you know, ask TSB a few years ago when people couldn't access their accounts for 3 months because the data migration had failed. You know, it can be that severe for a business. So we have to make sure, and Alan said there with this example of Bromford, you know, 18 practices before you go live. At least then when we went live, it was absolutely fine. And so that's the right way of approaching it, making sure it's going to work.
So when you look back on those projects, what kind of lessons or insights have you carried through into the way you deliver solutions today?
So the biggest insight for us is to really work with the SI and the business, because as Dave was saying, whilst we're doing the data migration, actually a transformation program is a complete package of work. And we are arguably the sort of, you know, no one can go anywhere if we don't do our work, but we have to be involved in a lot of things. So rather than sitting behind the scenes, focusing on data migration, we're front and center in the program teams. We're understanding the business processes. We're getting access to the legacy systems. We're building very good relationships with the people that operate those. We build a comprehensive set of data quality rules and catalogs, not only looking at cleansing the data, but also making sure that the data we're migrating actually is fit for purpose. And each of the key bits of data that are driving processes are as accurate as we can get them, whether that be through the migration of actual data or actually determining data from other data points. So I think the really important thing is it's very easy to migrate data from one place to another. The trick of it is to make sure the data is fit for purpose and it serves the business for the purpose that it should do. And that's where, you know, the level of engagement that needs to be put in is really important. The other learning that we've also built over the years is that once we've migrated the data out, the businesses that we're working with very often want to archive data. So as part of the processes that we build as part of the migration, we're also scoping and understanding what we've left behind. So should they want to archive the data that we've left behind, which is more often than not the case, we've already been thinking about that in terms of the work that we've been doing.
Just to build on what Alan said there, one of the key learnings I've taken from various years in data projects is it's all about the people involved in the process, and not necessarily directly involved, but who are going to be customers of it, who are going to use the system in the end. Because we've seen a lot of implementations where either there's a desire to cling on to the past, so I want the new system to work exactly like the old system did, and there's kind of an education piece there to say, well, if that's the case, why are you bothering to move? You know, let's utilize what the new system can do and change that way of working. But it's making sure that that business change piece is in lockstep with the technology change and transformation. Because again, when you move to phases like UAT, where user testing, where they're accepting that, yes, I can do my job now, if people haven't been brought along the journey all the way, you can get some nasty surprises at the end when they look at it and go, well, this isn't what I wanted. I didn't know it was going to do that. Oh, no, I can't do it with that. And that can put projects back. So, you know, making sure, I talked earlier about having a clear roles and responsibilities. On that matrix, part of it is, you know, who's talking to the business, who's making sure the departments involved are consulted, are aware, are understanding of what's going to happen, who's making sure that they've had sight of the software so they're not surprised by anything. It's all going to be as they expected. And again, that just makes it a smoother process. You know, we've seen implementations, not of data migrations necessarily, but of other data projects where that hasn't been the case, and the whole thing can fall apart right at the very end when all the money and all the time and all the effort's already been expended, and suddenly somebody goes, actually, no, what, we can't work with this because of this fundamental flaw that we now can't change. So making sure that the communication and the lines of communication between us, the client, and the SI are very, very clear, I think is fundamental to ensuring success of a program.
So looking ahead, I'd love to hear where you see Migra going from here. What's sort of next on the horizon? You're a 20-year-old startup. You've got a lot of experience between you, and it's great that you are firmly fixed and you have a passion for the sector.
I think that, and hopefully this is why Alan's asked me to come on board. But I think the first thing we want to do is really build on the great work that's already been done by the team in establishing themselves as experts in this area. So there is a huge legacy of success that we can build on top of. This isn't a firm, as you say, that's just popped up overnight and has got no track record. People will recognise Alan, I'm sure, from various projects, and they can trust that. We're going to be here for a while for the first thing. And I think we want to become the go-to people in housing. There is going to be a lot of consolidation in the sector. Just the nature of the macro environment means the economies of scale of being a larger social housing provider will eventually mean some of the smaller ones start to get swallowed up, and we've seen that over the last few years. But every single one of those involves a migration, involves bringing data from a legacy system onto the current platform and making sure that we're not forgetting about the people at the end who are the tenants who live in the houses. We want them to have a really good experience. So if they were mid-repair when their housing provider got acquired by another one, that job doesn't get lost in the cracks, and that repair gets carried out, and the tenant continues to enjoy a good experience. And then beyond that, who knows? If we can grow big enough within social housing that we're well established and that people know us, then it will probably to look adjacent to other public sector or pseudo public sector organizations, sectors where we can use what we've learned in social housing to help them. And we've done that in the past in other businesses, but I think this one's got, as I say, migration's a skill set that when you need it, nothing else will do. And there aren't that many providers out there who specialize in it. And so if we can become the one that's the best known, then great, we've done well.
For anyone either watching us today or reading our article in the magazine, what might they need to do to prepare themselves for their own migration project? Is there, I think it would be wrong for me to say, is there one silver bullet, because there's probably several. But what's one piece of advice you'd give them, and how best could guess they could get in touch with you?
So to get in touch with us is really easy. There's myself, obviously David Bamford, and Alan Sheldrick. You can reach out to us by email. You can visit us at migra.co.uk, and we'll leave those details with you, George, to publish with this. In terms of piece of advice, migrating systems is like moving house. Right, everything that's in your house has to come with you, or at least you need to decide what you're going to keep, what you're going to leave behind. So I would make sure, or if I was giving someone advice, I'd say to make sure that you have a very clear path, a very clear goal. This is the system we're going to get to. This is why we're getting there, and in order to make that work, this is what we need. And if something isn't on that list, leave it behind, let it go, because there's a lot of people who. The easiest thing to do is to say, well, let's take everything and we'll sort it out when we get there. And to my mind, that creates an awful lot of extra work and noise. I prefer well, let's work out exactly what we need and then take that. Alan, you've probably got a lot more nuggets than I have.
I think to me, to roll off that point, it's about being open-minded, because like you were saying, Dave, if you bring everything along that you've got now, you're effectively building the same system you have already. So you have to be open-minded to considering how your business processes work, how you can simplify those as much as possible, and make sure that you've got the right people in the team who are going to be part of that program, that can be true decision makers. Because actually, when you make a decision, you need to be able to move forwards. Otherwise, a lot of programs I've worked on tend to go round and round in circles, getting bound up with people challenging decisions that have been made. And it kind of goes round and round in circles, and it makes a very confusing, complicated picture that you then end up unpicking for years to come. So I think you have to look inward at yourself, find the right people, and be very open-minded about the way that you work today, and how you might have to flex that a little bit to meet the processes going forward, and really ultimately to simplify the transactions that you have with your end customers.
Well, brilliant, guys. Look, well, from me, George Grant, from David Bamford and Alan Sheldrick, thank you very much for your time. And we'll obviously publish the details of how people can get in touch with you. And it looks like we're going to be hearing a lot more about you over the coming months and years. So thanks very much for sharing some of those insights. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we say goodbye?
No, I think, thank you, George. As I said at the top of the call, we're here now. We're in the sector. We're active. Please feel free to reach out to us, even if it's just for advice and an exploratory chat. We're more than happy to have those conversations.
No, yeah, and from me as well. So thank you, George, for taking the time out. But yeah, 100%. You know, we're here. We've been here for the last sort of 10+ years, and now it's good to be driving a business forward where we can really make a difference in the housing sector and hopefully other sectors to come.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, guys. All the best.
Cheers, George.